My friends, evening to you. Thanks for hanging out. You're going to notice that there are two of us on screen, and that is for an important reason. But we'll get to that here in a second. This is my friend Jim, and
Well,
Jim, it's good to hang out with you. Thanks for
always.
thanks for joining the stream.
Yeah.
So as people come on here, we'll get digging into things. But I appreciate everybody coming to hang out and enjoy this chat. So in the comments, we got one comment.
He
David
must be
Cooper,
talking about you.
finally an expert on this channel. I like David's dad jokes; they're great. But yeah, this stream is going to be focused on mapping and walking through our Uinta Highline trip later this summer. But this is also designed to be like a hangout, a discussion, ask your questions. So the bullet points are that Jim and I are going to be hiking the Uinta Highline Trail together at the end of the summer. And then the reason that happened is because why, Jim?
Because I wanted to do it and I invited you.
Yeah. Wasn't there like some discussion of this is your backyard? How have you not hiked this trail yet?
I was a little surprised that you hadn't hiked the whole thing yet, definitely. But also I kind of bullied you into it a little bit. At least I feel like I bullied you into it a little bit because I was like, well, I'm going no matter what. And you're like, you really shouldn't do it by yourself. And I'm like, well, then come along. Let's go.
Fair enough. It didn't really take that much convincing, but it was
it was pretty easy.
Yeah, making sure that I could get the time away from the family. That was the bigger thing. So the other thing that's funny about this is so we've got a comment here. What is the Highline Trail? So this is the Uinta Highline Trail here in Utah. And it's a 100-mile long backpacking route through the Uinta Mountains. I'm going to pull up the map here. So we are going to spend a good amount of time this evening going through how to use OnX Backcountry, who is sponsoring this live stream. They are a huge support of my channel, and I'm super grateful for it. But as I've talked about OnX, I've had quite a few people say, like, I don't know how to use it. Could you spend some time walking through just some of the basics of how to use OnX?
I don't know how to use it.
Yeah. Jim, come on now. I thought we were friends.
We are totally friends, but we are the odd couple of hiking because you are like the planning logistics guy. And I'm just like I know where it starts and I know where it ends and I'll figure it out guy, which is probably not always the best idea, which is why I'm really happy you're coming on this trip with me.
Yeah. So explain that a little bit, because you last year hiked the Tahoe Rim Trail, which is a longer trail than this.
I did.
But logistically, is it as difficult from what research you've done?
I don't think so. I think the Highline Trail is going to be considerably more planning intensive, if that makes sense, because the Rim Trail, it's 174 miles roughly.
Okay.
But it's also heavily trafficked, and there's road crossings and opportunities for resupply, opportunities to bail off the trail if you just get hurt or just decide you're done and you don't want to do it anymore. And the Highline Trail doesn't have those. Once we're in there, we're committed. We have to get from one end to the other end. And there are no resupply points, so we have to carry all of our food with us for the whole trip from day one. And I think because the Rim Trail is so popular and so populated, that like things like finding water sources and stuff like that is really easy. Like there's a far out map that you can just open in the app and it shows you, there's water here, there's water here, there's camping here, there's camping here. And so I think from a planning perspective, the Highline Trail is going to be a lot more difficult. And I think just like the terrain and the elevation, it's all together. Even though it's a shorter trip, it's going to be a much more challenging trip.
Yeah. The elevation aspect of the Highline is definitely a key thing that is a struggle for a lot of people. Majority of the trail, once you enter the wilderness area, is above 10,000 feet. So it's above tree line. It's exposed. You're going over several passes that are over 12,000 feet in height. The Highline comes close to Kings Peak as well, which is the tallest peak in Utah at just over 13,000 feet. So we've got Kings Peak over here and 13,527. And that is not maybe quite halfway of the trail, but it is incredibly remote. So if you're looking at the map here, the closest big city is Park City, Utah. And then outside of that, to the north, you have Evanston. To the south, it's pretty remote. So there are exit points on the trail, but you don't have, it's not like, oh, I'll just hike to a trailhead and then it's easy peasy from there. It's like, oh, it might be a 2-hour drive on a dirt road that may require 4-wheel drive, or you got to find a way to get somebody out there. It's logistically, it's tough, and that's part of the reason that I've never done it. So this is a good question. Is this a through hike? What do you think, Jim?
Yes, it is a point-to-point through hike. I mean, I think it meets all the qualifications.
Yeah, I'd say so. What's interesting about this for me is I have never, the longest trip that I've ever done is 60 miles, which might it might shock some people that is the case given like my resume of hiking, but this will be the longest continuous hike that I've ever done in the 3 decades of backpacking experience that I have at this point. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But here's a good question. What is the biggest change that is being implemented in our gear selection, given this is the longest trip that I've ever done? Are there any particular items you're especially excited about testing or using? You want to take a stab at that real quick?
Not much is going to change for my gear. I tend to do longer distance hikes pretty regularly. It's not unusual for me to do 60 or 70 miles. I think the biggest thing I'm excited about is I don't have to carry a bear can this time. On the Tahoe Rim Trail, I had to lug that bear can for 174 miles. So I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to not have that extra weight. And I did just get a new backpack from Pilgrim Packs, the Roan.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm excited to get some real time on trail with that. I've only had it out for a very short trip. So I'm excited to get that pack on the trail and particularly get it out on the trail in Utah where it was made.
Nice. Yeah. For me, I have not really made the gear decisions yet. I'm trying to decide between a couple different tent options. And a lot of that gear selection is going to come down probably a week or two before we leave for the trip.
Yeah.
But the two tents that I'm looking at right now, I've got a Durston X-Mid 1, the new 2025 version that I'm considering trying, as well as the TFS Enron 1, which is also a tunnel style, good option for being in the Alpine, which is the areas that we're going to be and everything. Right. My kids are coming to hang out as well. Nice. So
I think in terms of my shelter specifically, I'm going to learn from a mistake. And it's hard to say it was a mistake. It was just a bad choice. I brought my X-Mid on the Tahoe Rim Trail, and there was
Okay.
one night. There was one night in particular where I couldn't find a place to put it up because I had the X-Mid 2, the really old, I think it's like second or third generation, the drop model.
Yeah.
Mine's pretty old,
Yeah.
but it's got a fairly significant footprint. And so there was one night in particular where I couldn't find a place to set it up. So I ended up walking an additional 15 miles before I could find a campsite. And I don't want to have to do that on the Highline Trail. So I'm going to bring my tarp tent rainbow,
Oh, cool.
one person.
Yeah. Have that benefit of the semi freestanding.
Yeah, and with I carry trekking poles, so I can make it a fully freestanding tent if I need to.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that as a solution for sure. I think this is good, Jeff Peters. I still think I'm a noob, and my longest trip has been 85 miles. Maybe I'm not a noob after all.
85 miles is very
That's
respectable. I think you
yeah.
are
That's not a
safely
short
out of the
amount.
noob category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's important to operate with the understanding that there's many, as you have said, Jim, many right answers for backpacking. There's not
Yeah.
just one way to do it, right?
I think that's one of the things that I love about backpacking is your kit's going to be different from my kit. It's going to be different from Huck's kit. It's going to be different from my buddy Brian's kit. It's going to be different from Rod Outdoors kit. And none of us are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's a personal comfort issue, like the thing that works the best for you. I know you and I have had conversations about certain pieces of gear where, either I didn't like it, but you loved it, or vice versa. And there's a lot of right answers when it comes to backpacking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important. Very often, I think location dictates a lot of our hiking styles, right?
Yeah.
Like I live in an area where there is just an abundance in wilderness and national parks and national monument area and land to explore on, that there's not long distance trails where I live.
Right.
But Utah's amazing. there's so much cool stuff to do.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Which, speaking of, let's dig into some of this mapping stuff and questions about the Highline, as well as the use of OnX here. Because the idea is, like, I want to show what that planning process looks like for me and how I use OnX to do that process. And there's some really good questions that have already come through that help define this a bit. So just to give you a bird's eye view of the Highline and the Uinta Mountain Range, what's unique about the Uintas is it's a really, really old mountain range that runs east to west. Now, we're used to seeing mountain ranges, at least here in the United States or North America, running north-south, right? The Appalachian Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Sierra, like it's all north to south,
Right.
Directional, right? But what's unique about the Uintas is they're turned the other direction and run east to west. And what's unique about that, and part of what makes the Uintas difficult to hike in, is that orientation from a weather standpoint makes for the range to create its own weather patterns, basically, because it's like this barrier for like southern winds that come through and everything. So you have really nasty lightning storms and that kind of thing that comes through the Uintas, and that logistically can be hard when you're trying to move quickly on this trail. But there was a question from David Cooper saying finding water sources on OnX are his biggest struggle, and then Huck Outdoors, what's the longest water carry on the Highline? So that is where things get interesting, because the start, if you are starting at the eastern terminus for the Highline, which is an area called McKee Draw, what I've done here is already added the trailhead waypoint. The first like 4-ish miles of the trail from a key draw to East Park Reservoir, we'll map this here in a second, that's not a concern for water. The concern for water is from East Park Reservoir all the way until I believe it is pretty much like Lady Peak, right? Which is about a 16-mile dry section. However, with the awesome information from what's his name, Dylan,
Yeah, Dylan
that
over
owns
at Pilgrim.
owns Pilgrim.
Yeah,
This is why you network. This is why you like make friends with other hikers, because Dylan recently did the Highline and gave us some information of a like 80% reliable water source that drops the pin there. That is a little bit of a jaunt off of the trail itself, but the reality of this as well is, yeah, there's a trail marked right here, but very often it's not a super well defined path.
right.
If you've watched any videos on YouTube about the Highline, you'll notice that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start mapping this out a little bit and see if we can't get through our first and second day of hiking, because we're going to be out for 7 days total. Day one is like a travel day, right?
Yeah.
And then we're going to start hiking as soon as we get out of the car, and the destination being East Park Reservoir for the first night, right?
Yeah, I'm pulling up that Google Doc that you made.
Oh, right.
And I should
While you do that, I'm going to see if there's some other questions here. Space asteroid. Yes, I have had in the past the Featherstone backbone. It's a great tent for the price. I did see our friend Scott mention something here. I wanted to get to this before we got too deep. He says, I know that you can download maps to use for offline or no service areas, but how does the map know where you are located if you don't have cell service? Great question. It functions off of GPS. So it just uses that GPS in your phone to know where you're at, which is nice.
All right. Yeah. So I've got our itinerary up. So yeah. So day one would be mostly a travel day, and then 4.6 miles to the East Park Reservoir.
6.4.
4.6.
4.6. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we'll do, let's map that out and start showing how this functions. So here on, let me just say this. I love maps. I love mapping my routes and I love the whole process of putting together itineraries and just doing as much research as I possibly can. A good example, I'm just going to head south here for a second. My infatuation with the Escalante area, I do a lot of mapping, and there's a lot of stuff going on here with the amount of planning that I do. So when I'm sitting down to plan my trips, I get very detailed to make sure that I have all the information in the palm of my hand, essentially. And so what I have the ability to do on my OnX account is here on the left side, I have all of my content that I've created. And what I've already done is created a Uinta Highline Trail, the full route that becomes a home for my routes, for my waypoints, for any information that I want. So when I sync this to my cell phone, then I've got all that information already there, and then I download the entire thing for offline use.
So I actually have an OnX question because I've never used this app before.
Let's hear it.
Can you access, like when you're creating this map of the Highline Trail, do you have access to data from other OnX users as well, or is it just your stuff?
It's both. So you'll see that there's like this green and yellow line. Sometimes it's red.
Mm-hmm.
This is showing information of like elevation gain.
Okay.
But this is sourced information from a few different resources that OnX has access to. So in a way, it's a little bit crowdsourced. So you do have this whole Discover tab right here. So if you're zoomed in on an area, it will show different types of hikes and routes that you can do.
Will it show waypoints? Like if somebody found a water source and they put a pin in that, do you have access to that?
You do not.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not like open source information
Okay.
that way. What information you put on a map stays there unless you share that information with somebody.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So what we'll do, let's go ahead and create day 1 of our route. I'm just going to do this. Now you've got all these options of different colors, the different style of line that you want, the weight of the line. You can put notes, and then we're going to add it to a folder here. And then this will either work as like it'll snap to the existing trail if that is embedded in the information in the planning. But very often when I'm like planning an off-trail route through a desert canyon in the sorts, then I would use this point draw. Okay. And then you're just manually clicking. But I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to start at the trailhead. And you'll notice, like, as I just drag my cursor, it'll follow that trail or that particular line, which is pretty cool.
Oh, and it gives you all the elevation information. And
yeah. And so it'll do that in real time. So like right now we're already at just shy of 3 miles. Okay, so if we say that's our first day of hiking, 4.4 miles, 1,152 feet of elevation gain. Now it's not going to be 100% accurate, but pretty close.
Okay.
Right. And then I will click save. Now what I'll do, because somebody did ask in here, can you find campsites on OnX? Yes. But in the sense of like, I will get detailed on satellite imagery, essentially, whether that is the satellite imagery here on OnX or Google Maps. And I'll look at as close as I can get to see what's kind of viable for the area. And then you also have 3D mapping with, you can do this on Google Maps, but also, or Google Earth, as well as here on OnX, which is super cool. And they also just added offline 3-dimensional maps, which is, I think, really cool when you're looking at what does the elevation look of a high elevation pass kind of scenario, or if you're in a situation where a friend busts their face open because they fell and you need to find a way to get out. Don't ask me how I know that.
I suspect it's some video evidence.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool tool. But what I'll do at this point as well is go over here to add a waypoint. And then with my cursor on here, I can just drag and drop. And we'll just call this and then create a camp. I'm going to change that to red so it matches the red line for this. And that's essentially the really simple basics of creating a line, adding a waypoint, and adding it to the map. So there's day one. Let's look through the comments here and see what other questions there are. Anything that's sticking out to you, Jim?
John's question there about if your subscription expires is pretty interesting.
Let's see.
This is with the OnX paid version. Once you build a route, do you have access to your routes if your subscription expires?
You do, yes. But then you're limited on what the features provide, and in being able to download for offline use and all of that. Here's a good comment. DDFF says, I'd love to switch to OnX. However, the Android app is virtually unusable. That's a bummer. I am an iPhone user, Apple user, so I haven't experienced that. And I think that's the first time I've heard somebody say that the Android version is not as well optimized. David Cooper, do you download a low resolution version of the offline map to cover such a huge area? In the past, I've always done high resolution, and I would probably do the same and just download multiple offline maps instead of trying to cover that entire massive space, if that makes sense. Yeah, the higher the resolution for me, the better. I think it just is a better option.
Once you have the whole route built, not like the full itinerary planned out, can you export it as like a GPX file into other mapping apps?
You can.
Nice.
So if I go to my content, it's been a while since I've done that because I don't. Now I'm just going to look like a noob, like I don't know what I'm talking about.
You don't have to figure it out right now, but it'd be cool if I had it on my phone too.
Yeah, I know that you can export the individual. Anyway. Yeah, so you can export like the individual items, but I'd have to go back and remember how to export. There we go. So yes, there is a way to do it. It's kind of busy.
Gotcha.
But yeah. So, okay. Let's see here. What other questions do you guys have about the Uinta Highline? This being my first 100-mile hike. Anything that you want to ask while we walk through mapping some more of this? So we want to get through our second day of the trail. Now, we're doing this in 7 days. 100 divided by 7 is what math? just under 20, right? It's like 17, 16 miles a day. And so
I think technically it's 105, isn't it?
Yeah, 105, 106.
Yeah,
depending
7.
Yeah. So because it's not like a super well-defined, like exact route, there's
Right.
plus minus in there for sure.
Right. So if we'll just call it 105 because that's what Wikipedia says, divided by 7. So we're looking at 15 miles a day average. We'll have to add, I'm sure some days will be longer, some days will be shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're looking at an average of 15 miles a day.
Yeah. So with that information, like that's good math to do, because now as I'm mapping each day, so if we go ahead and start that, so I'm going to build a new route. I'll just call this day 2. We'll make it purple, add it to a folder, and then we're going to start. I'm looking off to my side because I'm looking at another screen over here. And what's funny about this too is like this is all national forest land, so you're not quite in the wilderness area. So there are all of these like random dirt roads and stuff.
Somebody a while back, I've lost the comment now, but somebody asked about the potential for resupply, but I think everything I've read logistically, that's pretty difficult. Like you have to have somebody come in either on horseback or with some kind of a 4-wheel drive, like a side-by-side or something like that. There's not any like towns or villages or anything like that, like a traditional resupply. It would take some serious planning and help.
Yeah. The closest or the best option for a resupply is at a lake called Chipeta Lake,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the main places that majority of people start. They'll start their hike, and skipping this whole section from a key draw up to what's called Lady Peak. So I think 20 miles that day. That feels like a really big day.
Depends on your perspective.
That feels like a really big day. I'm not sure if that is.
Yeah, I think in that terrain, that's probably a really big day. I mean, I do 20-mile days pretty regularly, but this is a different beast. The Highline Trail is, like you were saying, it's not a super well maintained or manicured trail. It's not, it's not like hiking a section of the PCT or something like that where it's clear where you have to walk. You have to do a bit of route finding. And it's my understanding that some of the sections are kind of bushwhacky and rough. So 20 miles is probably big.
Yeah.
In that terrain.
Yeah. So my thinking here is that, and this is the fun part of trip planning. We know that there is a high potential for a water source right here, right? Mm-hmm. Based off of Dylan's information.
Right.
And we know from like other people that have hiked it that there's been some options, right? But if we wanted to, given that we're making some good time, right? Instead of camping at East Park Reservoir, we camel up with like as the maximum water that we have carry availability to do.
Right.
And then just continue walking until we're done for the day.
On that first day?
Yeah, on that first day. And if we do, because it's not going to make a difference of camping in this set of trees versus that set of trees.
Right.
It's all gonna work out pretty well. But doing an extra 2 or 3 miles that first day, where it's not crazy elevation, you're still, you're close to 10,000 feet still, but you and I, we live at elevation.
Right.
So we're not acclimating the same way that somebody would be if they're coming from sea level.
Yeah. And I do think, for me at least anyway, just the way my body has operated in the past, if we can, the higher up we can get on that first day, the better I'm going to feel on the second day and the third day and the fourth day. I feel like it's usually that first day at elevation that's the struggle. And then if you can acclimate by sleeping, higher up, then the second day is a little bit easier, and then the third day is a little bit easier, and then you're just fine. You're just normal.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's been my experience. But again, we both have the advantage of living at higher elevations.
Yeah. I just want to address a comment that popped up from Sean. He said that ads keep popping up on the live stream. I thought I had toggled that off. So I am sorry that you're getting served ads during this. That was not the intention. But at this point, it's a little late to jump into fixing that. So I apologize for the ad breaks. I meant to make sure that was turned off, but something must have happened. Okay. Let's.
Did you see Jeff's comment
about the guidebooks?
No, the 20 miles at low oxygen, and also Space Android, the 20 miles with 5 to 6 days of food. Yeah, those both add difficulty to the process. Absolutely. I think that's one aspect of this hike where I'm going to be making the biggest changes is what I'm carrying for food to try to minimize my weight, but maximize my calorie intake. That's something I've been kind of playing with, and I'll be doing a hike July 4th weekend to kind of practice with this new food system.
Yeah. Maximum calories.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, it's going to be tough. I've done 6-day food carries before. It's not terrible.
It's not the worst. And I think minus the bear can is going to be the biggest benefit for me. Cause I did a 5-day carry on the Tahoe Rim Trail. Plus the bear can, which just makes it that much worse.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll see how it works out. This is a good comment. So Rod is saying, not sure if it's for me. He's earlier said he just downloaded OnX and he's playing around with it, but that he's not seeing landmarks or markers compared to all trails at his local state park. Creating a custom map seems cumbersome. Kind of reminds me of the Garmin Explorer app. I think that's a great observation, and it comes down to like preferences, right? Like some of us really enjoy the process of studying maps and building out a map and doing that planning, while some others like far out, or it's been a long time since I've dabbled with all trails because I got so tired of bad information from the comments of people spending like the reviews that populate, right? And so I stopped using all trails because of that. And I'm glad that there are a variety of tools, and not every tool is going to be the right thing for everybody.
And I think it depends on the trip too, because like, so I've done the Lost Coast Trail and I've done the Tahoe Rim Trail using Far Out for both of them. And because those are such well-established trails and there's so much good, like quality information about them, it wouldn't have made sense for me to go into OnX and build my own route, plan my own trip that way when all that information already exists. So I do think depending on where you're hiking and where you're backpacking, the apps serve a different purpose.
Yeah, like if I'm going to go hike the JMT, the John Muir Trail, I'm likely just going to download Far Out.
Right. Because all the information's already there
Mhm.
from the thousands of other people who have hiked it.
Yeah. Which is super nice because it provides all of that information, right? It gives you the logistics that help just taking that aspect of the in-depth planning that can be cumbersome for a lot of people. But yeah, I like that perspective. Like Rod, I appreciate you sharing that, because as much as I love OnX, it's not the perfect thing. It's not going to be the right tool for every single situation. So yeah, that's awesome. What else we got here? How do you know? I like this. How do you know where not to camp? This is a great question. This comes down to doing some like Google searching, blog post reading, right? But there's also within the layers, if you have an elite membership with OnX, which is like the highest paid membership, there is a layer that will show private land and government land. So you saw that color change on the map. So I'll toggle that again. So what that is showing is now all of the Forest Service land. But it will then also show this barrier, which is going to be your how you went to wilderness. So I think the answer to that on like a bigger scale is, in some places there's not an abundance of public land, right? My Sonos speaker thought I was talking to it. But yeah, you would find the private land in that. So maybe if we zoom up here a little bit. So all of these red line areas, this is all private land. And your elite membership with OnX gives you that access, which is pretty cool. But yeah, where not to camp, some of that also just comes down to like doing the research, but also time spent doing the activity, right? Following Leave No Trace, if you want to get nitty gritty,
Right.
not camping within 200 feet of water sources and trail and that stuff. So, okay. Looking at the other comments before move on to the next. Anything that stuck out to you, Jim?
There's a couple of funny where not to camp ones that I got a kick out of. Sean and Jeff are having a good time over there.
I like Sean.
Yeah. I don't think there are there bears on the Uinta Highland Trail?
Not there's black bears.
Okay.
But they are not a concern whatsoever.
Gotcha.
Not a concern. Yeah. Yeah, Sean and Jeff, they are great supporters of my channel. Names that very familiar with in the comments for a long time, and like really appreciate them. They've always been awesome. So let's see here. Okay, I like this from Huck, that when he's doing his PCT section hikes, he'll combine OnX and Far Out. Using Far Out for campsite comments and finding water was key.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's probably because you used Far Out for your Tahoe Rim.
I did, yeah, and I use it. Yeah, and I've downloaded the whole PCT map because it was less expensive than just buying each section. But like Huck says, I use it on all of my PCT section hikes. And the thing that I really enjoy about Far Out, and it's why I asked you the question earlier in this stream, is that you get live updates from the trail. So, for example,
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So, for example, there was a water source I was planning on utilizing on the TRT. And so I pulled up the comments, and hiker after hiker was like, oh, it's bone dry, it's bone dry, it's bone dry. So I knew I had to get water before this specific water source that I thought I knew about, because it was dry the year I was out there. And so that kind
Gotcha.
of stuff is really helpful because you can get, um, like people leave notes like, a tree fell at mile 93, be careful, or this water source is dry, or um, one of the really funny ones, because the main resupply point on the rim trail is Tahoe City. And when I was out there, like 15 minutes before I got to this trail junction, another hiker had posted very curious bear at junction, whatever it was. And so you kind of get these live updates, and trail conditions as you go.
Which only happens if you have cell service, right? Those comments can only be added and updated live
I
based off
don't
of that.
know the answer to that question. I think it might all work with your, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
in order
you,
for it to sync so that other people can
yeah, I
see.
mean, you have cell service for most of the Tahoe Rim Trail, so I guess it didn't really occur to me. Um, but thinking about it now, yeah, because when I was on the Lost Coast Trail, I didn't see a lot of those comments, and you don't have cell service for the majority of that trail. So yeah, I'm going to go with yes.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so I am just, man, this is some big mileage,
In
but I'm here
turn,
for it.
yeah, I am too. I like big miles. I'm that guy. I know, and again, there's so many right answers when you're backpacking, but I'm that guy that likes to walk sun up to sundown and then just use the campsite for sleeping and eating and get up in the morning and do it again.
Yeah.
Um, I've done the kind of hiking, where it's like, oh, we'll walk 8 miles and we'll spend half the day at camp, and um, I get really anxious, and I want to be walking, I want to be moving the whole time. So this will be a good trip for that because I think we're going to have to move pretty efficiently to be able to get it done in the time frame that we have available.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Doing those 15 to 20-mile days is going to be necessary,
Yeah,
especially with doing the side trip to tag
to the summit. Yeah,
Kings Peak.
because I feel like that's a necessary side. I mean, you can't go next to the highest peak in Utah and not touch the top.
Yeah.
You know,
Like for me, the fact that I've already been on the summit of Kings,
Mhm.
if I was doing it with somebody else that had also been on the summit, we would likely skip it.
Right? Yeah, that
But
tracks.
but because you haven't, and
Right?
being able to say, yeah, I summited the tallest peak in Utah,
Yeah,
or for that state, that's a big deal. So yeah, doing that 100%. Of course, we're gonna go.
yeah.
Okay.
Specific to our second day,
Hmm.
um, where does that spring? Um, like, is that like our midway point for that day, or is that early
That is a
on in the day?
good question.
I'm just trying to gauge what our water carries are going to look like.
So if I hover over the elevation profile here,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see the dot that's kind of bouncing around on the line.
Yep.
I like this aspect because sometimes I want to know how far that waypoint is.
Right.
So roughly 7.7 miles is what it's showing, but then
So
about quarter mile probably down trail from there.
okay. So
So
roughly halfway.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay.
And our friend Huck, he's saying, can you show viewers the elevation graph that OnX has for the trails? So that's the elevation profile right there for that, based off of this particular line or this route that was created. So between the starting point and the ending point, it'll show you all the green, yellow, red for the severity of the height or the change in elevation, and then just for that full distance. And it'll show you your full distance of that particular route for that day, as well as elevation gain, elevation loss. And I would say that it's fairly accurate. It's not as accurate when you are in a desert canyon, because sometimes it's so narrow, the line will like bounce from the bottom of the canyon up to the rim, and it'll show like change in 800 feet. It's like, no, we're walking downstream in a canyon. We're not gaining 800 feet in that case.
I like Jeff's most recent comment here. I am a huge proponent of carrying paper maps and studying guidebooks, and knowing how to use a map and a compass, because as cool as all these apps are, phone batteries die.
Totally.
GPS signal can get blocked when you're in a canyon or if you're in a deep forest. And I always have and carry with me a paper map and compass for every place that I hike, that I use in conjunction with all the cool new technology that we have available. But like guidebooks and maps are invaluable as far as I'm concerned. They're like a must-have.
Yeah, I would agree. I do think with the guidebooks, though, taking some of the information with a grain of salt, depending on who the author is of the guidebook.
Yeah.
Because here in Utah, there's a guidebook author. His name's Stephen Kelsey, that everybody jokes about. Oh, it's a Kelsey route. It's going to be like, if he says it's a slight uphill, it's like probably a class 4 move kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's it's kind of funny for the Tahoe Rim Trail. There's like one kind of definitive guidebook, and it's a great book. It's wildly detailed, excellent information, but I had to go through and combine, just because of my pace and how I like to hike. Like I would go through and combine, okay, well, his day 1 through 3 is my day 1. His day 3 through 5 will be my day 2, because he was doing, 4 miles here, 6 miles there, 8 miles here. And I'm like, no way. Like I'm doing 15, 20, 18, but all the information was there and it was super valuable. And I was able to combine the days, what he considered 3 days basically ended up being my first day, but all of the campsites and the water and all that information was still there and it was still super valuable. So it's a great book. But like you say, you have to kind of take it and apply it to your skill set, your skill level.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. I like this question. How many liters would you gauge for a, let's say, 8-mile hike?
Dude, I get this wrong every time. I'm bad at this. I'm bad at this part of it.
At elevation, I'll just answer it for me.
Yeah,
I would probably be in the 3-liter range for being at over 9,000 feet. We'll say over 9,000 feet is at elevation.
Right.
I would anticipate 3 liters of water consumed during that time. But there's other factors, right? Like how hot is it, and what's the terrain like? How much elevation is within that?
Yeah. And is there water at the end of that 7.7 miles?
Yeah.
Am I carrying water for that 7 miles plus the next little chunk, or am I walking, between water source to water source? But I always, I I was going to say 3 liters as well. But I have run out of water more times than I care to admit.
Oof.
Um, or the flip side of that, I have carried entirely too much water. And so I've never gotten the right answer. It's always, I'm either like desperate to find water or my back hurts.
Fair. 2.2 pounds
Yeah.
adds up quickly when you go from 2 to 3 to 6.
Right.
I like this. I like this question from Hiking with Roulette Run. Here in Indiana, in the state forest, often there are reroutes due to logging operations, and it's very important to contact DNR to plot those on a map before setting out. I love that comment because that is so out of anything that I would ever be concerned about here in Utah. Like the difference of location changes so much of how you plan things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the Tahoe National Forest, this is a concern. This is something that have to uh I have to call our version of DNR, and find out, where the logging crews might be, um, what an appropriate reroute. So that is something that I'm used to doing in a lot of the areas that I hike. And then I have a trip coming up July 4th, um, where I had to be in contact with 2 different um, groups, because part of the trail is outside of a wilderness area and the other part is in a designated wilderness area.
Mm.
So I've been trying to get information from multiple sources to try to figure out, because it's similar to the Highline Trail in that it's not necessarily an established trail. There is technically a trail there, but a lot of it is, some of it was man-made trail, some of it connects to game trail, some of it connects to use trail, some of it's just route finding. And so, yeah, I think that's a really important. I think reaching out to your local conservation groups or whatever the management group is, the state management group, is super helpful. You can get a lot of really good information from those folks.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all of that. But then there's also the aspect of wildfires,
Mm-hmm.
which, depending on where you live, that becomes a struggle, right?
Yeah.
And I know that on like the Tahoe Rim Trail, even on the Uinta Highline here, the Uintas, because there are such intense electrical storms, there's several fires every season that are natural cause in the wilderness area that they just kind of let burn, and that actually has become a crux point for a lot of the last few miles through the Rock Creek Basin.
Mm-hmm.
It burned so intense in that area that the trail just completely was decimated, and the recovery of it has been really like drawn out, and so
Yeah.
it's not been as effective. So there's a good chance that we bypass that entire burn area and go off of the Highline and do a couple extra miles. I think it's 3 extra miles
Mm-hmm.
on the head of Rock Creek Trail
Okay.
that provides incredible views, but it adds mileage, and but is adding miles better than going through a burn area? I
We
don't know.
walked through a pretty significant burn area on the Timberline Trail, um, and there wasn't really an opportunity for a reroute, or we didn't have any choice really. It's just you had to get through it. Um, I find them kind of morbidly interesting. It's interesting to walk through and see like what vegetation is coming back first, and like obviously if you lose a significant mass of tree cover, that may not come back within our lifetimes, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of other. It's an interesting study in resilience, I guess. Just watching, like, what wildlife comes back, what plant life comes back, and how the flora and fauna adapt to the kind of their new environment. So I guess it depends on how long the burn area is
Yeah.
I guess would be the biggest question.
Yeah.
So David's question here: how far off the trail is the King's Peak? It's essentially, I mean, we have to go off trail to do the summit, but the trail goes right past the base of King's Peak, right?
Yeah. So we're actually at that very part of the trail. So at this point, I'm just going to go back a little bit before mapping that here on the route. But what I like about this is now I've got essentially every day as a general guideline.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's impossible to say what kind of things are going to happen. If we get stopped by storms, we can't get over a pass. It's not safe to go over a pass,
Right.
or we're just moving slow, or we're moving super fast and completely blow past the planned campsite for the day. Any of that's possible, but this at least gives it an idea of what we're looking at, which I think is pretty cool. And I'll end up going back through this and adding other various waypoints of information. Maybe like get here by noon, so that we're like, we got to get over this pass by this time, so we're not dealing with storms and everything. And that's a good example here. So if we want to do Kings Peak, this basin right here is called Painter Basin. And getting through this is like super key, where we don't want to be all the way back here by Fox Lake at the start of the day.
Right.
We want to be a lot further, because if we are going to summit Kings Peak, I don't want to be summiting at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
like super sketch. At the time we're going, it's kind of at the tail end of monsoon season, so we have to be mindful of that. But this is Anderson Pass right here. So we'll do this pink. I'm going to do a dashed line. And where this trail junction is right here, what we'll end up doing is dropping packs. But I do this often. So in the way that I kind of organize my maps is I'll have solid lines for my main route, and then I'll do dashed lines for any kind of like spur trips that I would do to find water, or an alternate, just so that when I'm looking at the information on my map, I know what is what.
Right.
And that is just over half a mile, 800 feet of elevation gain, but it's 12,800 feet to 13,500 feet. So that half mile is it's not a long distance, but.
And really, it'd be a mile, because we got to get there and back.
Right. That is correct. But we won't have our big packs on.
Right. Yeah. Just grab some water and a couple of Cliff Bars and go.
Yep. Oh, Hunter, it's good to see you, man. Congratulate Hunter on his recent engagement.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Hunter. That's exciting.
So
I just had my 22nd anniversary with my spouse. So
nice. And I had my 14th.
Nice.
So cool. I think at this point, like that, I mean, it gives a general idea of the use of OnX and how I've want to be planning and mapping things. and to show what that process is. We're just over an hour of time. I want to give anybody last minute questions that they have. We'll maybe take another 10 minutes here, but it's getting late for some people, and I got to make sure my kids are still alive.
They have been quiet for a while.
They have been quiet. So, but I hope that this is like helpful information. I know it is pretty like kind of nerdy, super detailed, and a little like kind of niche, but I think showing this really simple process of just kind of what I go through of planning a trip and laying this groundwork as a basic way to get started, and then getting more detailed with other research things. Because what I'll do is I'll spend time in like videos and blog posts on YouTube, or just searching Google and see what kind of information I can find that would be helpful to add notes to any of these things. Like, is there information that I need for each of these passes that we go over, or important junctions to pay attention to, things that were confusing for people, and just to add that information to my map so that it is stuff that I just have available to me. So if I have a question, I'm like, man, it'd be cool to know some information on this. Then I can at least maybe have something that would help guide.
Right. I like that idea. And I think it's kind of funny. I mean, I joked earlier that we're sort of an odd couple when we're hiking, but it's kind of true, because you really dive into this aspect of the trip planning and you're very meticulous, and I appreciate that about you, because I'm not that guy. I figure out where I want to go, how long I want to be there. I find out sort of the basic information, is water available? Are there any places I'm not allowed to camp? And then I kind of like the surprise of it. I kind of like that aspect of the unknown, I guess. Because like when I was doing the Rim Trail and the Timberline Trail too, because I used Far Out on that trail, it took a little of that away, because I had all this information right at my fingertips. I'm like, okay, we're 0.35 miles away from the next water source. We're 1.4 miles away from the campsite. And like my buddy Brian and I, who I hope is still coming on this trip with us, he's still talking about it. So there might be 3 of us.
Yeah.
But we hiked this kind of off-trail route that's adjacent to the JMT. And part of it actually was on the JMT, like going from canyon to canyon. We had to walk on a section of the JMT. And we did enough due diligence that we weren't going to like get ourselves in trouble. We weren't going to be in danger. But we didn't know exactly where we were going to sleep every night. We didn't know all these things. And we ended up stumbling across, like, to this day, the best campsite I've ever stayed in my entire life by complete happenstance. And I love that aspect of, like, we nicknamed that campsite the JMT Hilton. It was, to this day, it's the best campsite I've ever stayed in.
Nice.
And I like that aspect of it. I like that kind of surprise where you just stumble across something. You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah. I think that's, it's all within different styles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I really appreciate, because we've done a couple trips together now. And I do appreciate how meticulous you are and how detail oriented you are when it comes to planning. And like, I want to be that guy, but I don't, I don't have whatever that gene is. I'm just like, oh, I start here, I end here, I'll figure it out, everything else all along the way.
Yeah. I like this comment. David says, don't show Jim your phone.
I mean, I could just follow him, David. he's gonna be right there.
Yeah. the
Stalk him.
the other aspect that I'm excited about with this trip is we personality wise are fairly similar, at least like in the hiking styles. And if we're not like butt to nose hiking, it's not gonna be an issue. Like having a little bit of distance between us is not going to be this thing of like, oh my gosh, is Jim mad at me, or like
Right.
this big problem. But we won't obviously also be like doing our own hike.
Right.
We're hiking together, but I think that will add some of that immersion into the experience, as opposed to having to have conversation the entire time and like
Yeah, and I think
that whole thing,
especially based on the two hikes that you and I have done together already, I think we both kind of zone out and get, lost in the environment, and we're looking at different things. I think the last one we did along the Escalante,
mm-hmm.
I was really I don't know. Surprise isn't the right word, but it was really cool to see how different our photos were at the end of the trip. Like the stuff that you thought was photo worthy versus the stuff I thought was photo worthy. And I think that was pretty cool. And we did do, we talked a lot at camp, but while we were walking, it wasn't really, other than, oh, we have to go up this bit of slick rock, or we have to cross the creek here, or whatever. There wasn't a ton of just like idle chit chat. And but then at night at camp, we talked about all the different stuff, and it was interesting. And it's always interesting to me, no matter who I'm hiking with, it's always interesting to see like the things that stood out to you during the day. You're like, oh, did you see this one thing? I'm like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. But did you see this thing? And you're like, no, I missed that. And I love that. I love that part of it.
Yeah, 100%. And I like Hunter's comment here that you need time to think and film two perspectives on the same trail.
Yeah, because I think that was the other thing too. Our videos for that Escalante trip were different, and it was funny because we were on the same trip. We walked the same miles, but the stuff you shot was completely different than the stuff I shot, and like my thoughts throughout the day when I was doing like the talking head bits.
Yep.
I was feeling different than you were. You were in familiar territory. I was in completely a brand new environment that I've never hiked in before. So I'm excited about that aspect of the Highline Trail too, because I think we're going to have very different perspectives of the same experience.
Yeah. And I have a little bit of a confession with the Highline. The part of the reason that I have not done the trail is kind of twofold. One is getting the time away from my kids. Like I have a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a almost 10-year-old. And so over the last decade of marriage and now with kids, it's hard to get away for a full week of time.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's more important? Hiking a trail or spending the time with my kids and together as a family? But the other aspect is over the last like 5 years, probably, I hate to say this because it sounds, I don't know if pretentious is the right word or whatever, but I kind of got bored of the Uintas. Like I got bored of doing a lot of the same trips, and the western side of the Uintas, it is so busy. There's people everywhere, and I just was like, I'm kind of tired of spending my time here. My perspective on that has changed quite significantly in the last year, which I'm happy about. And so my excitement for doing the trail is a lot higher.
Can we answer Space Asteroid? Are you doing the gear check?
Yeah. I was going to pull that up.
Yeah, I am. July 4th weekend, I'm hiking a trail here in Nevada that I chose specifically because it's kind of a Highline Trail mini. The elevation is similar but lower. The length is similar but shorter. But I'm going to carry all of the gear that I plan to carry on the Highline Trail on this. It's a 62-mile route. It's the Taiyabe Crest Trail is what it's called. And so, yeah, I'm going to carry everything on that 62-mile trip that I'll be carrying on the Highline Trail. I don't do traditional like gear loadout videos or anything like that on my channel. I just it's just not my style. But as I hike that trail, I'll be talking about what's working for me and what's not in terms of the gear I'm carrying on that 62-mile route.
Yeah, cool. From my end, yes, I'll be doing a full gear loadout video of what's planned and what's being tested and everything, since that is the primary focus of my channel is showing the gear and testing it and how it functions in the backcountry. So yeah, there will be plenty of testing going on, and I'm actually thinking, like, as fun and enjoyable as the X-Mid would be for this trip for me to use, I probably won't take it because it in a lot of ways is already proven, which is like one reason to take the tent because that I can trust it.
Right.
But I enjoy the aspect of taking a piece of gear that maybe is newer to the market, like the TFS Enron 1, that is a tunnel style tent. I actually have a video coming out this week on the 2-person version of that tent. It's really cool. So I'm excited to potentially use that, but then I got to decide like which backpack I want and all of that for the testing aspect.
I think for the most part, I'm going to stick with the kit I'm most familiar with. I mean, I have a bunch of different shelters. I have a bunch of different backpack options, but I always tend to gravitate towards specific gear items when I'm going on trips where I'm in unfamiliar territory.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm going to stick with my comfort items, with the exception of that new backpack, which I've only got like 20 miles on so far. I'm excited to get some real mileage with that Pilgrim pack and see how it performs.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to point out from a planning aspect. Like, we spent all this time talking about mapping today, but the mapping, at least this is always what I tell my students. There's 2 silos of backpacking planning. There's your trip plan, and then there's the gear. And you can't choose your gear until you have your plan put in place, because your gear needs to facilitate the execution of that trip. So a little scratchy in my throat, sorry. And so like I can't plan all of my gear before I know what is going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Now, for me, if I was to go out and do like the John Muir or the Tahoe Rim Trail, I'm going to go with the gear that's familiar and that I like kind of have that relationship with, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Versus I'm so familiar with the Uinta range, I know what to expect. I know what the terrain is going to be like for setting up a tent. I know I'm not going to be like in crazy rocky areas and it be a huge problem. So I'm more willing to experiment and take a risk, if you will, on a piece of gear, because I think I can manage it knowing the area so well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's only 7 days, if something doesn't work out.
Just deal with it.
Yeah.
I like Sean's question here. What's the bathroom situation in the area? Cat holes or wag bags? It's a cat hole situation, which is nice.
That is ideal. Carrying 7 days of wag bag would be unpleasant.
Yeah. I like this. Rod, bring the UGQ Alpha Direct lined quilt for the haters.
I just watched that video at lunch today. So.
That was funny. I like that. Let's see here. I think Hunter is the gear guy. He wants to know all the gear.
Gotcha.
Hold that thought, Hunter. It'll come. It'll come. We're coming up on an hour and a half of this stream. we need to be done. But sweet.
Oh,
So
David's got a good one there, and I think this is something we're going to disagree on. I always carry a sit pad, and I know Devin, at least I'm going to call it 95% of the time, carries a chair.
yeah, I am going to bring a chair only if my base weight is low enough that I can justify it.
Okay. I will carry the same sit pad that I have carried for the last 2 years. So I'm not a chair guy.
Yeah. Because part of it is like, if we are doing such big days, the amount of time that I'm sitting in the chair.
Yeah, I mean, by the time we get to camp, we're gonna probably cook dinner and then just go to bed. At least that's kind of how I'm envisioning it going, especially if we're hitting that 18 to 20 mile mark on any of the given days.
Right. So cool. Well, Jim, this is a lot of fun. Like I said a few minutes ago, it got nerdy. It got very specific. It got maybe a little boring for a minute there. So for the amount of people that have stuck around and hung out for the last hour and 20 minutes, thank you. I appreciate you spending your evening with Jim and I.
It was cool to see a bunch of familiar names and some new folks that I have not seen over on my channel yet.
Yeah. So if you've not checked out Jim's channel, go check it out. It's Lost Again with Jim. And after a little bit of a hiatus, it seems like you're back. And
I am. Yeah. And I'm probably going to do a video about this pretty soon, but I'll give you all a preview. I had post-trail depression when I got done with the Tahoe Rim Trail, and I just didn't want to do anything backpacking related at all. But now I'm back, and I've gone on 2 trips already this year, with one coming up this weekend and another one coming up July 4th.
Sweet.
And I did some, I volunteered with a local trail crew. I'm getting back into it. So
nice. I love it. The last thing I'll say, since this was heavily focused on OnX, if anybody wants to try OnX that has not already, I have like a 20% off coupon, but don't use that. Go to any of my recent videos, and in the description of the video, I have it's like a 70% off link.
Oh, wow.
So you can get a year membership for the premium for, I think, $9, which doesn't equal 70%. I think the 70% is on the elite, which is $29 for a year when it's normally $100.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to try it, go check it out. And when you check out, select my name to show that that's how you found out about it. But yeah, give it a try. There's also like a 14-day free trial kind of thing. But I like it. OnX is a supporter of my channel, and will be for the rest of the year. So I'll keep talking about them. But even when I've not been working with OnX in a like direct relationship through the channel, I still use it and love it. Like it's a big part of how I plan. There's a lot going on up here in the Uintas. My favorite place to spend time, down in the Escalante area.
think I'm going to pull the trigger on it and get OnX. I haven't yet. But
I'm genuinely not sitting here trying to be like a salesman and like,
right.
you need to try it.
Well, like the majority of my backpacking this year, with the exception of the Highline Trail, is going to be focused on Nevada, because the bulk of my backpacking experience so far has been in California and the Sierras. And I live in Nevada. I've lived here my whole life, and I don't know enough about the trails and wild spaces in my own state. So this whole year is going to be focused on backpacking in Nevada. Cool. And there aren't a ton of established trails, there aren't a ton of established routes. So it's going to be a lot of meticulous planning and figuring things out. You know, we just did that Jarbidge trip, and there's not really a trail out there. I've got, even though it is technically like a recognized trail, the TCT, there isn't much trail there. It's a glorified route. And so I think something like this will come in handy, especially for this year when I'm exploring these areas that are not as well traveled.
Yeah. And the thing that's cool too is like once you create all of that information, you map things out, then it is available because you've got friends there in Nevada that may reach out to you for information.
Right.
And you would have the option of sharing that folder of information with them or exporting that GPX or KML information. Say, here you go. Like if that's your desire to share that. And I like those little subtle things that can be done with all of the mapping that happens. And that's part of the reason I'm so detailed on it is I get asked by students after I've spent a semester with them of, hey, I want to go spend time in this area. And it's a way for me to look back if I've done it and say, oh yeah, here's some information. Or like, it's not just prep for a trip, it's follow up after a trip that I have essentially a journal of information that I like to have.
Yeah. And I can see that coming in really handy in your profession as well as a teacher.
Yeah, totally. So Woodall Trails afternoon. Good afternoon, my friend. Okay, friends, thank you for hanging out. Jim, thanks for taking your evening to
it's just exciting. I'm really looking forward to this trip. So
yeah, it's gonna be amazing. So lots of content and information to come out. Jim will have some things. Go check out his channel, Lost Again with Jim. And then I'll have videos over the summer that'll relate to prepping for the Highline. So appreciate you guys. You're amazing. Like genuinely, thank you for spending time and taking an hour and a half of your evening to hang out. It means a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see you.